Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Panther Dauphine. This is a currently ranked 4 battle rating 6.0 French medium tank that costs 6,090 golden eagles and comes with 15 backups. In this review, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about it, including its stats, how it plays, I'll go over its strengths and weaknesses, I'll give some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation on if I feel that this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. As always, please consider subscribing if you'd like more content like this, as I always greatly appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into the review. To start, I'll place its stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to know are its armor pen, its power to weight ratio, and of course its armor. Now for how it plays. Well, this is a Panther tank. More specifically, this is essentially a Panther A/G model, as it has the same turret mantlet as the A model, but many of the features of the G model. A little weird, but such is the life of a French Panther tank. Regardless, this Panther still has surprisingly good mobility on top of an excellent armament and fairly good survivability. Though of course this depends on how well you maximize its armor. With that said, because it has a good amount of each of the aforementioned traits, you can play Dauphine almost any way that you want, at least in a down tier. This means that it can be a sniper, frontliner, flanker, base capper, and even a brawler in said down tiers. In up tiers, the role of this vehicle becomes a bit more narrow, being forced more so into the sniper, flanker/base capper, and support roles, as the other mentioned roles require a bit more armor than what the Panther has. Again, you can maximize the armor on this vehicle through a number of different means, and if you're interested in that, check out my Panther guide, which I'll try to leave in the comments below. Regardless, once you get beyond 6.0 BR, but more so beyond 6.3 BR matches, the frontal hull armor on this vehicle becomes much easier to pen, as many tanks beyond that BR have very powerful cannons and even advanced ammo types that mitigate the relatively thick and well-sloped armor of Dauphine. Even still, when properly angled, the frontal hull armor will be a challenge for many tanks to get through. As alluded to earlier, the great thing about the Panther tank, with Dauphine included, is that it can play however you want. Though it isn't a main battle tank by any means, you can see that this was kind of a predecessor of them in some ways, in that it tried combining most or all roles into one, and did so with a decent level of success, despite not really looking like an MBT. But with all that being said, Dauphine has a very powerful cannon and good mobility, with armor dependent on the BR that you're playing, which combines to make this a versatile tank that can be fielded in ways to suit your preferred playstyle. Now with that being said, let's go over its strengths and weaknesses, and first for its strengths. This vehicle has an amazing 75mm cannon between its high armor pen, accuracy, and decent enough post-pen damage. Second, this vehicle has surprisingly good mobility. Third, it has great frontal hull armor when combined with its slope and relatively decent armor thickness. Fourth, the track armor covering the right side of the turret can help protect against weak guns or highly angled shots. For its fifth strength, this has a decent turret traverse rate of between 14 and 20 degrees per second, depending on crew skill. Sixth, it has a pretty good gun depression and elevation that runs from -8 to +18 degrees. For its seventh strength, this has an excellent suspension that will sometimes allow for accurate firing on the move, which is especially nice being that this does not have a stabilizer. For its eighth strength, this has a fairly spacious interior that should limit post-pen damage against Dauphine. And finally, it has premium RP and SL bonuses. Now for its weaknesses. First, it has a fairly mediocre amount of frontal turret armor, especially on the apex of the mantlet. Second, as with most tanks, but more so kind of on the Panther, this has poor side armor, which is where a substantial amount of ammo is stored, at least if you carry enough of it. Third, this has a very large turret, and also is weak on the sides and rear of the turret. Fourth, because of the turret mantlet design, the Panther Dauphine has a shot trap that can ricochet a rare shell right into the crew compartment. For its fifth weakness, this features a large commander's cupola that acts as a large and nearly always visible weak spot. For its sixth weakness, this also features a somewhat weak lower glacis plate that will lead to many transmissions being destroyed and many drivers being killed. For its seventh weakness, this also features a large MG port weak spot in the hull. Beyond this, we also see a poor reverse speed of just around 4 kilometers per hour. For its ninth weakness, this lacks the APCR present on other Panthers. For its 10th weakness, this is also very commonly seen in up tiers. And finally, the Panther is a very large tank with an especially tall profile, which makes this a fairly large target. Now with all that being said, let's get into how I score this vehicle. And first, for its armament, I give it a 7.25 out of 10. I don't know if this is a controversial take, but I absolutely love the Panther's armament. It has excellent armor pen, accuracy, and decent post-pen damage. Unfortunately, it does lose a bit of its bite at this BR, but it can still do a ton of damage. It would score higher if it had more explosive filler on the inside of the shell, and if it had APCR from its German counterparts, but it still does quite well with its stock shell, with nearly 200mm of armor pen at max. But due to the lack of APCR, as well as the lesser turret mantlet from the Panther A, I still kinda think that this should be 5.7 BR, which, if it ever went down to that, I would say that this has a 7.5 out of 10 in the armament category. Now that being said, for mobility, I give it a 6.25 out of 10. The Panther is definitely a bit quicker than its power to weight ratio suggests, which is in large part due to its fantastic suspension. This means that off-road mobility is great on Dauphine, and also means that firing while moving is fairly doable with this vehicle, again despite lacking a stabilizer. Now for survivability, I give it a 5.75 out of 10. This is a weird one because the Panther can be incredibly survivable or not survivable at all, really depending on where you get hit. On one hand, Dauphine has one of the worst traits of later Panther models, giving it a lesser mantlet of the A model, and also having it lack side skirts like the G model. Because of this, it has more ways to easily die, namely on the turret face compared to other Panthers. But still, if you're facing an enemy who is inaccurate or simply doesn't know the weak spots of Panthers, of which there are a surprisingly high amount of players like this, you can easily survive a ton of shots that will continually deflect off the well-armored front hull. To put it concisely, it isn't so much what enemies that this vehicle will face, but rather what players it will face and how experienced they are that will determine Dauphine's survivability. The other thing that determines your survivability is how well you maximize your armor. Again, angling is king, and if you want, check out my Panther guide if you want some tips on how to best survive with the Panther. Now overall, I give it a 6 out of 10. Again, a weird score, because it comes in slightly lower than the absolute average of the parts. The reason for this is simply because this is, at least currently, the second worst of the 6.0 BR Panthers, barely beating the T5 in the Russian ground tech tree. It's still a great tank, but it is at a flat-out disadvantage compared to other Panthers, namely in that it lacks the APCR and, at least compared to the G variant, lacks the improved mantlet design, while still receiving mediocre track armor on the side of the turret in return. Again, the Panther and by extension Dauphine is amazing and will still be a very powerful offensive weapon. It's just that it isn't quite as good as other comparable Panthers. But what can you expect from a French Panther tank? Also, if you guys don't know, the Panther F also has a much better reload rate than this, so I guess that has this going against it as well. But with all that being said, do I recommend this vehicle? For me, as a Panther lover, yes, I do. Personally, I mean, if it was just considering me and how much I love Panthers, I'd give this thing a 7.5 out of 10 overall, but of course, it's not all about me. If you're more or less indifferent to Panther tanks, then I would say that I recommend it, but really only for a sale. While it has a great armament, mobility, and variably good survivability, it is, again, slightly less than, at least when considering other 6.0 BR Panthers. If this vehicle decreased to 5.7 BR, then I would say 100% this is recommended for purchase, even aside from being on a sale. But for now, Dauphine is as close to being an average vehicle as a Panther can be in War Thunder. Again, I'm trying to be as non-biased as possible, as I love Panther tanks and have literally published a guide again on how to play them, which is linked below. But Dauphine is good, not great, and you want to be as close to great as possible when spending your own money in War Thunder. But with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Seriously, it means the world to me. If you don't mind, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let me know what you guys think about Dauphine in the comments below. But either way, thanks again, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.